Is it his looks? Is it his possessions? What does it take to be a man? When does a boy become a man? We live out loud with Derek Banga from Public Image on growing from boys to men next. Hello and welcome to Sheila Lives Out Loud. I'm so glad you found this channel. My name is Sheila Mwanyega. Please click subscribe. Remember to hit notifications so you never miss an episode when we upload. We are living out loud at Westwood Hotel, and the conversation today is moving or growing from boys to men. Joining us for that chat is Derek Banga. Derek, hello.
Hi, Sheila.
It's always a good time when I catch up with you for a conversation. And you know, today is one of those tricky ones. From boys to men, and we're not talking about the group. It's these struggles of the boy child are becoming a bit too much.
Yes.
How are grown men walking around calling themselves boy child?
Let's start with that.
Let's start with that.
Boy child.
What is
You
that?
know, every time I hear that word, I think of a child, and a quote from the Bible comes to me. When I was a child, I thought like a child, I acted like a child. Now that you're a man, in fact, I would like to advocate that rather using the term boy child, use the term young man. You are a young man.
Yes.
And you're already, hopefully, beginning to develop traits, characteristics that will serve you in good stead as a man. So let's start there. So a grown man calling himself a boy child.
We're not going far. Just end that conversation there.
There you go, right.
When you grow up a little bit more, then come to the table and maybe we can actually have a conversation.
Yeah, right. Unless you're truly acting as a child, then you deserve to be called a
then
child.
you will be called what you are.
Right.
What does it take to be a man? What is a man?
This is a conversation, of course, that's been had numerous times over the last few years. It's become popular to kind of find out what's happening to the young man, they're in crisis, and all the things you've said are true in terms of parity between the genders. But I think the crisis, if I can use that word, that young men are facing falls, certainly where I'm standing, in three areas. And I call it's a lack of physicality, okay? So here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that young men need to master physicality. Secondly, they need to master their emotional side, okay? And each of these will break them down, what entails all of them. And then thirdly, it's intellectual mastery. So mastering of the intellect. As I said, from where I sit, those are the three areas that we need to start looking at. So let's
begin with physicality.
The physicality.
Break it down.
Young men are growing up in society where physical fitness is completely lacking. People are spending, and when I say people, I'm talking about young men, are spending the majority of their time sitting in front of the TV, binging on Netflix, posting pictures on Instagram, and not taking care of their physical well-being. Let me give you an interesting statistical story, if you will.
Okay.
During the 1950s in America, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was the president right after the World War, looked around and said, hey, listen, we won the World War. We're now 10 years into peace. And he saw a trend of young men not being physically fit. You know, back in the day, if I can use that term, these were men who were physically fit. They were ready to go out and defend their country. And so he actually established a national council to make sure that young men were, and it was not just young men and women, were participating in some sort of physical activity on a regular basis, whether it was in schools or other areas. I think it is time that such a council, if you will, was established, because physicality is linked to mentality. The way that you process thoughts, the way that you are able to do analytical thinking, I think is based a whole lot on how physically fit you are. And I'm not talking about necessarily going to the gym and lifting weights and that sort of thing, but engaging in some physical exercise. These stories that we hear of men who are marauding the streets of Nairobi and attacking women and other men, where there are other men who are just sitting and watching
and recording
would
on their
never
phones.
happen, I think, if there was that sort of mentality where, you know what, if we are physically are masculine. I'm not saying that I'm the sort of person who's necessarily going to jump at the first sign of trouble, but I think I would, because I know that I have mastery of my physical self. I know that I can involve myself in something that requires some sort of physicality, and hopefully able to equip myself well. There's this fantastic movie that has been made of a real incident. Terrorists on a train in Paris, and 3 young men were able to stop this man doing a whole lot of bloodshed because they had mastered their physical selves. I think that is the beginning of a lot of problems, and it starts from a young age.
Being able to be physical, and in this conversation, let it not be misunderstood or misconstrued to say that a man is the fact that he's got biceps and he looks like Johnny Bravo, and he terrorizes everything in sight when he shows up in the building and everyone's ducking for cover. It's also I'm thinking practicality, physicality. It's someone who'll say, I've looked for work, I couldn't find something. I'm going to go and dig in the shamba. I'm going to carry wares. I'm going to create stuff. I'm going to make something. I will rely on what God has given me. Perhaps my skill is football. So I'm really going to work at being the best footballer I know, and I will be snapped up by some company or team somewhere, and I'm making something progress out of my life. It's looking at what have you been given first. Because as a man, you have been entrusted something. Even the spiritual laws say it. You have been given something. Are you working that something?
Perfect example. And that's how God created us. God created us to be physical beings. Certainly, I'm talking from the man's side of perspective. Okay? If you look at the physical structure of a man, the body structure, God created a man, broad shoulders, narrow, the ideal concept of a man. And that is actually what he wants us to do. Now, whether it's farming on the land, or even if you're working in the office, I think that a lot of the problems that we have, whether it comes down to health, whether it comes down to how we behave in society, comes from the fact that we don't take that aspect of our being as serious. And it starts from a young age. I remember doing PE in schools. I don't know if that's still the case. So it, in fact, includes everything to how we sit, how we carry our bodies. You know, Sheila, for example, sitting in certain ways or holding your body in particular postures increases levels of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. So think about yourself. You're sitting in a boardroom where you're doing a job that requires you to sit down. You're not necessarily doing a physical activity. But because your body lacks that sort of physicality, you cannot hold your body or sit in such a way to reduce the level of cortisol, which reduces the level of stress, which ultimately makes you a better performer, even when you're doing a job that doesn't necessarily require you to use your physicality. So I am so passionate about this.
I know. You sit up straight, stand up
all of
straight.
That. And part of that, the reason I'm able to sit like this is because my body has the physical strength for me to be able. A lot of people can't because they don't have the mastery. They slouch because they're...
You know what the
muscles in their back can't even hold them up. There you go. All right?
Where you
and
going?
You look like you've given up on life, like I was sharing a little bit earlier, but in another...
No. But we're not giving up on life just yet.
We're not.
Because we're still unpacking all these 3 things on that which makes a man. We've talked about physicality. Let's move on to the next one.
So the next one was the emotional intelligence or emotional mastery. Now, this is where men need to act like men and use our emotional intelligence. So when you get cases of men who are physically abusing their partners, men who are verbally abusing other people, men who engage in even, Twitter tirades and things like that. You're a keyboard warrior. You go online and you troll people because you think that's what makes you a man. That is, to me, lack of that emotional intelligence, emotional mastery. How do you deal in a situation where you're with somebody and you are involved in a relationship and the going gets tough? Is yours to become physical? Is yours to go on a verbal tirade? I think men need, or young men in this case, need to be aware of this and start working towards being able to control and master their emotions. A lot of what we see in society today, whether it's, people in places of prominence saying whatever it is that they want to say and thinking they're able to get out of it. A lot of that has to do with lack of that emotional capacity or emotional intelligence. Self-awareness, knowing these are my buttons and I know exactly how they're going to be pushed, so I know when to step away. That sort of thing. Self-awareness, awareness of other people, and things to do with that.
In speaking about this second aspect, there's a quote that I saw somewhere, and I can't quite remember who said it, but the question was, who teaches men to be men? The aspect of physicality, you can learn that anywhere, but there's something very specific about a man learning from a man. Because I think to myself, if you're a single woman and you have to raise a child, then, circumstance is circumstance. You do the very best that you can. But there is something about what a man will teach a boy, or what a man will teach another man. And in learning that emotional control, in being that master of yourself as a man, who's your first teacher?
That's a great point. So we can bring up the issue of lack of suitable role models. Now, a single parent, a single mother, it may be a little bit more difficult for that young man, but that's why people who are in positions of prominence, public figures, have a duty to impart this sort of knowledge. And we're talking about, in this case, being able to master your emotions, how to deal with the situations, to these young people who are looking up to them, maybe because they don't have somebody in their house. I mean, obviously, there are teachers, there are other people within the community. I mean, I remember a time when a young man or a young woman was brought up by the entire neighborhood. And it wasn't just a case of the parents themselves. So, talking about that, if you're somebody who people look up to in society, it's your duty, if you're on Twitter and somebody trolls you and you have a significant number of followers, your response is going to be seen, is going to be observed by this young person who perhaps doesn't have a particular male role model in their house. And so their job becomes even more important.
I think we're down to our final pillar, intellectual / spirituality / all the above.
So the intellectual, you can break it down even to things like spirituality. You can even bring things like grooming and style, which I'll talk about and show you how it is all connected. So intellectually, do you have a thirst for knowledge? When was the last time you picked up a book and you read? Do you encourage young people to read? Now, I'm not talking about reading 140 characters on Twitter. Yes, there's a time and place for that, and Facebook. I'm not saying get rid of social media, but I'm talking about what was the secret to the success of a Mandela or a Kenyatta or Socrates. The blueprint has already been written, and you can simply find that information by having that thirst for that kind of knowledge. And thirst for the right kind of knowledge, So if it comes to style, for example, and grooming, have that thirst of knowledge to realize that I can go beyond just dressing the same way every day and perhaps improve myself depending on, my circumstances or things like that. A thirst for that spiritual knowledge. I feel there's a lack of that intellectual curiosity, if I can use such a term, with a lot of young men.
It has been packaged and you pick it up and you put it in your mouth and you swallow it, but you don't question. You don't find out, where has this come from? Why is this resonating with me? Why is this not right for me? Why do I need... There's that curiosity, it died.
Yeah, there's accepting things the way they are, and not necessarily that I expect you to be a rebel or expect you to necessarily lead a revolution when it comes to something. But I expect you to be able to try and collect all this different type of information. Actually, social media has made it easy. You can go on any platform these days and find out more information. But I would like to see, as I said, that intellectual curiosity and then a mastery of that intellect. So pick something, decide you're going to be good at it, master that particular thing. Listen, I don't knock people who have side hustles. Believe me,
we all need side hustles.
But you have mastered your craft, Sheila. This is what you're good at. This is what people know you for. You may have other things going on the side. There's nothing wrong with that. But have you mastered your craft? Do you go out and watch interviews that other people have done, develop different interviewing styles, all of that sort of stuff, which makes you master at what you're doing.
Right.
This is what I'd like young men to do. Pick something. All right, I'm going to be a plumber. I am going to be the Picasso. I'm going to be the Michelangelo of plumbers. I may have a real estate business on the side, but when it comes to this particular area,
can't touch me.
I'm going to become a master. That's what we're talking about.
Becoming a master. As we get ready to close, Derek, I can speak to you until the cows come home. It's always a wonderful time to chat with you. Let's just be very clear about what a man is, because we jumped into this conversation, and I think it's important for us to define a man.
Great question. And you're right. It is difficult to define a man. Everybody might have a different take. So I'll give you Derek Banga's take.
Yeah, we can live with that.
This might not necessarily be my unique version of how I see a man, but certainly how I would like to see our young men as they turn into men who are fully contributing to society and taking a great country like ours, which has potential, forward.
Right.
I'll use a term called heteropolitan. Now, heteropolitan, again, that's not a term unique to me. You can look it up online.
No, don't tell them what it means. Let them look. Reading. It's all in encouraging the reading.
But that's a sort of man who, as I said, contributes gainfully, positively towards society. This is a sort of man who, when it comes to relationships, whether it's relationships with people at work, relationships with his friends, relationships with his partner, espouses particular values, fidelity, honesty, trustworthiness, that sort of thing. Not the man who has multiple partners and is revered in society because he hops in and out of bed, but the man who can stand up after being with 35 years of the same woman and every day and say, that is my woman and I love her. That is the role model. That's the kind of man that I want to see in society. The kind of man who, for example, takes how they are seen in public seriously. So in terms of the communication style, what they say, how they speak, whether it's using words of politeness and things like that. There's certain people who, when they carry themselves out in public with other people, you can sort of see that they have a respect, not just for themselves, but a respect for other people, and also how they are seen in society. So, for example, when I talk about grooming and style, people say, all right, you want to be this and that. And I say, listen, this is how I want the world to see me. Right. Somebody who respects myself and I respect other people. I'm not saying you have to become a clothes horse or become a fashion maven. But there's certain basic standards that you need to be able to espouse. That's the sort of man I want to see. But that's the same man who can protect his loved one when she's having her earrings snatched on a street in Nairobi. So you're physical,
with the telephone.
But you still...
Hold on, honey. Let me just Facebook. Let me just Twitter this now. Right.
The kind of guy who can, I don't know, change a tire, for example. I want to see some of these old-fashioned...
No, there's some things
but there are things that I don't know if
need.
You can.
I get it completely. You cannot define the man, but you know a man when you're in the presence of a man.
Yeah, and women, I think, want that kind of man. That's the kind of man they want to respond to. They want a man that they can look up to, that they can be proud of, whether that's a family member or a partner or somebody they know in their social circle or in business, and say, yeah, that person sort of espouses a sort of values that I would like to see more of
someone who respects
in our society.
You, someone who wants the best for you, someone who's not threatened by you or your power or your future or your dreams or your plans, but somebody who's going to walk with you and let you be the best you.
Yeah, they're out there, Sheila.
I haven't given up, That's why we're having this conversation.
Absolutely out there. There need to be more of them, and this needs to start at a young age.
Fantastic. Derek, I know we're going to be having this conversation continue in a different light. Thank you so much for making the time to be here. I know you do work a lot with helping men, become men, because it's so much more than just presentation, as we've just found out and talked about in today's episode. So we're going to post your social media sites, on all our social media sites, to get you doing the good work.
I appreciate it. Hey, this was fun, Sheila. Thank you so much.
I know, you're so coming back. Next time we're going to dress the man. Because apparently jeans, what did you say about jeans? You simply have to say it. We have to close with his fantastic words on men who wear jeans. Derek, go for it.
So I think what I said was that wearing jeans says that you have given up on life. Now, I don't literally mean that. What I mean is that there are other choices other than jeans. So jeans shouldn't be the default all
every
the time.
single day of your life, looking at a picture.
Even if you're working behind the camera. So there you
Look
go.
at the
Shout out to the
mirror.
cameraman right over there.
Look, I'm telling you, they're about to black us out right now. But thank you so much for tickling me and, of course, having this conversation as well. We are signing off from the Westwood Hotel. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. Remember to click subscribe and hit notifications so you never miss an episode. Until we catch up again, live out loud in your jeans, please.